got a gig to play at a wedding. It never happened, but at a wedding in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, they were going to literally fly the whole band out. And we got the tickets and we had the set list, and we were going to go for like 3 days to Uzbekistan, perform a show. And then they literally canceled, I think, 2 days before, and they paid us anyway.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
got paid to not fly to Uzbekistan, which in retrospect, because I experienced a lot of the world when I was touring, and it was amazing. And I can talk about some of that, how that sort of influenced me and my perspective of things. But I kind of regret. It would have been fun to go to Uzbekistan for 3 days. So that's my Tashkent story. Almost
But
went.
if it was canceled, maybe it was for good. I don't know which year it was. Was it during like the first, like we have two presidents, the first president or the
Sure.
second president?
Well,
What
so
year?
when did that transition happen?
Yeah.
Honestly, there was part of me that was a little suspicious about it. Like, were they going to like kidnap an American band and
Oh my God. I
yeah.
mean, I hear stories. Like if it was during the first presidency, you guys could have been in trouble. Like
Yeah. It might have been 2017, 2018. I'll have to think back. 2017, it
if
could
it
have
was
been.
2017, it could be maybe was it maybe like in summerish, because then president was like in he was like in a coma or something, and then there was like it was not stable, so there is a possibility they were suspicious, like because we did it like nobody knew that he died, like they
Yes,
didn't tell us that he
interesting.
died, so there was like a very delicate, sensitive moment.
You have me intrigued now. I'm going to have to go back and look and when this was, because I did a lot of touring, and that was it's sort of a blur now. But
Yeah.
it honestly could have been summer of 2017, because it was after 2016 and before 2019. So I'll have to look back at that. So,
Yeah,
very
because
funny.
he got the brain something, and then they didn't tell us. They didn't tell anyone that he was dead until they
It's so
figured out.
interesting how these stuff happens, all this intrigue in all these countries, and even in recent history, and we have no idea of of all this stuff. Like, it's crazy, all this drama and regime changes and all that stuff. This actually reminded me of a suspiciously canceled or a thing, another story that I don't think I've ever told before, which is in January of 2020, before COVID was just starting, right? But it was not like a thing yet. But at that time, I knew that it was going to be I was like, oh, this is going to be a thing. And I got an offer. I had many cruise ship as a performing pianist, musician. Cruise ships are a big a job that we do. You go on a cruise and you play. You're the piano man on a cruise, right? It sounds nice, but it's actually one of the hardest, least rewarding jobs, because you're basically gone for over half of the year, constantly changing times. It's not like you just go for like a week or two. Like, you have to commit. So it's not something that I ever did, but something that I kind of wanted to do. I was actually asked to be a ragtime pianist on like they had this piano that like moved around, and it had all these trinkets and horns on it, and you would like roll around the ship. And I actually had a friend that did the gig who recommended me. I never took it. Anyway, long story short, in January of 2020, I got an offer from Princess Cruises to go, I think, on a Japan tour, but it was a several month long tour of Asia or somewhere. And I think that ended up being the ship because there was this huge thing with COVID in the beginning where there was an outbreak on a Princess cruise. And I don't know if you remember that story. That was one of the first sort of, before things really went nuts, there was this event and everyone was reporting on, everyone got COVID on the ship. So this idea of, there's this disease that's going viral, that's deadly or something, that started with the star line of the Princess cruise. And I'm not 100%, but I think that might have been the ship or one of the ships that I was going to be contracted to go on. So I ended up turning that down because I had a feeling that the COVID thing was going to escalate. Not that it was going to be a problem on the ship or anything, because I wasn't necessarily worried about the disease. I was more worried about the response to the disease, if that makes sense. So there's that story just popped into my head after I'm like, oh, we almost went to Uzbekistan in a potentially weird situation, and then it got canceled, and they paid us anyway, which just is so strange. Like how that all went down. So yeah, getting offered to go on Princess cruises right before the whole COVID thing. That was another close call, because I could have been trapped overseas for like a long time too, because they quarantined the ship and everything, and it was a whole deal. So
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to take any cruise gigs anytime soon
Anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Not that they would offer them to me. So
Well, you never know.
That's true.
Climate everywhere changes.
That's
so.
true. I can change my identity as well. That might be a thing. So
Well, now I don't know. You were getting famous unless you do like a face change or something.
Well, I'm my excuse me. Musicians are notoriously bad at marketing and promoting themselves, right? That's why you need the industry to do that, and people and of certain persuasions. But I'm just really bad at promoting myself in general, and so I think a lot of my videos, I just don't even have any. There's just no name or anything on them. So for the most part, it's kind of like. And that was when I started my YouTube channel, and I chose the name Foundring, which is a sort of a name that I had made up in the songs that I started writing in high school as sort of this artistic persona that I was creating. I was very paranoid, not paranoid. I was just very cautious and wary of the internet when I made my channel in around 2006, right? So I started right when YouTube started, about a year later. And I kind of did it kicking and screaming. A few friends and family members said, oh, you should start a YouTube channel and put some of your stuff up there. And I was like, oh, that's dumb. What is this YouTube? I've always have that reaction. Like when things come out, they're like, oh, you should get an Instagram. Oh, you should get a TikTok. And I'm always just I'm an old school, right? I'm like, all right, fine. I'll get on your YouTubes that the kids using, right? And so I was very wanting to be anonymous. I didn't want to have anything to do with my real life persona. Not that I was putting out content that was controversial, even in the slightest. I mean, to be fair, I was kind of writing some fairly tame anti-Iraq war songs in the 2000s. So at the time when YouTube started, Bush Jr. was president, right? A lot of people don't remember that. And it was before Obama. And, not to like bore you with American politics, but this is kind of related because YouTube and all that stuff is all American, right? This came from the Silicon Valley, which ironically in California, I grew up basically 30, 40 miles away from the heart of Silicon Valley. Facebook, Google, all those guys, they're right next door to where I am here in Central California. So I was very wary of that, and I was disillusioned, not to give my whole political life story, but I was disillusioned with the lack of response to the wars, which had killed friends of mine who went to fight in Iraq. And I was like, I kind of woke up after 9/11, not like right away, but it was a good, important catalyst for me. And I started to see the world in a different light. And I'm like, why are we the 2004 election kind of felt rigged in that both Bush and his opponent Kerry were part of the same secret societies. And they were both part of Skull and Bones, which is a secret Masonic society from Yale. And the chances of that are like so stupidly astronomical. And they were running against each other, and I couldn't hang. And so anyway, I started questioning that kind of stuff and started writing songs questioning that. But I was nervous. I remember thinking even in 2007 that I might get in trouble for singing protest songs, which is strange because that's what America, I mean, going back even earlier, but certainly the 60s, if you think about the folk movement and all that music, it was protesting the Vietnam War. And then all those kind of the liberal hippies, including my parents' generation, really, they sold out in a way where they did all the drugs and they did all and then they got shiny toys, and they moved on to the 70s and 80s and yada and yada yada, and they were happy to get their fat houses and pensions and all that fun stuff. And as business continued as usual, and then as I saw them repeating these same kind of wars, and no one was really standing up for it. So I actually ended up dropping out of college because everyone was so interested in their their LGBT stuff and which pronouns to use. And this was in 2003 and 4 at liberal arts colleges in America. So this was over 20 years ago that this was happening. And they wanted to dress and drag and do all that. And I'm like, let's protest the government. And everyone just looked at me like I was crazy. So I'm like, I'm having none of this. So I pieced out, and then I just started writing music. Again, long story short, I don't give you my whole life story, but I then started a YouTube channel anonymously, and then eventually started connecting with fellow musicians that like to play this sort of old school, the ragtime, and we can talk about that and ragtime and old jazz, old American music, which is kind of my focus, especially lately. I started connecting with them. I started going to ragtime music festivals, which is still a thing in ragtime. Again, for in case you don't know, it's just an old pre-jazz American-made music style that uses this type of rhythm called syncopation, and it was very popular in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And there's still a bunch of people that are keeping it alive. In fact, it can be found all across everywhere. Social media, TV shows, movies, video games use all sorts of different types of ragtime. It is
What is it? I cannot. I know jazz, but I don't know ragtime.
Sure.
Is it like a famous thing that?
Well, so a lot of people are familiar with. Oh, I wish my keyboard isn't on right now. That's too bad. Are familiar with the Maple Leaf Rag by Scott Joplin, and also The Entertainer, which is another piece by him. It goes da 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 da. And a lot of these are played in ice cream trucks in America.
Oh, okay.
There's one called Turkey in the Straw that goes da 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 da. They're just funny jig like themes that are catchy melodies that use a special type of rhythm. Now, when you hear jazz, I don't need to give you like a whole music theory lesson, but jazz, people think of kind of swing, where the rhythm is sort of swinging around. Well, before the swing started to be a thing in the 1920s in America, and jazz really as a term didn't quite evolve until the 1920s. So all the early jazz musicians called themselves ragtime musicians. So they considered themselves to be playing ragtime. And what ragtime was, a modification of European dance forms, marches and waltzes and dances that America decided. When I say America, I mean, it was and this is a very complicated, I could talk for about 5 hours on this subject alone. I know that, but let me distill it for you this way, from a more nationalistic approach. I will actually I'll finish my story about the YouTube thing and I'll come full circle. Okay. So when I connected with the ragtime people, I started performing at these festivals and finding, oh, this is awesome. And I started collaborating with them. And then that is how I was able to take the next leap, where I got scouted by the band Postmodern Jukebox, which again is one of the biggest and most successful, if not the most successful, pop jazz band in the world. Like it's not even close, really. So I was all of a sudden taken from just this essentially kid, 20-something though, but I was kind of a kid, guy in his house making silly ragtime songs, to touring around the world with a big band in front of 5,000-10,000 people, audiences, like huge things. And I was able to share my music that I had learned with all these different cultures. I went to 5 different continents. So we were performing in Russia, in Australia, in Malaysia, in Singapore, all throughout Europe, in Germany. I performed in at least 5 cities in Germany, actually. And Keith Jarrett is an amazing jazz pianist, American jazz pianist, one of the greatest living pianists, one of the best of the last 100 years. And the number one selling piano album of all time was a concert that Keith Jarrett improvised, as in he just made it up on the spot, a whole hour of it, of jazz, but not really jazz, more just sort of classical jazz / improvisation in Köln. I don't know how to pronounce it. Cologne.
Yeah, Köln. Yeah.
Köln. Yeah, Koln. In Germany, and it's a very famous story. In fact, a movie was made about it this year. But I got to perform there in Köln, Germany, and I played a part of that concert that he did. So, anyway, my point is that when I went to these different places, we were sharing our American music, the sort of the jazz swing styles of the pop music. And I was also playing a lot of ragtime stuff. I was doing, like, you might not know, but Mario music from Mario video games is all ragtime. It's all, yes, it's what it's 100% ragtime. Ragtime is just syncopation, which is a fancy musical term for taking a square, straight rhythm, bum, bum, and then going bum, 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 bum. I mean, that's a little bit, I'm oversimplifying it, but it takes a normal rhythmic line and then sort of ragged time. That's what ragtime stands for. The time becomes ragged. It's not quite swing. Everything comes a little bit off. So you kind of like feel like instead of marching like a normal European march, all of a sudden you were anticipating the beat, which was happening in between the beats. And it makes you kind of want to dance instead. Now, not to go full music history, but Bach and Beethoven and Mozart, they all used syncopation in their music. They didn't write everything. They were geniuses, right? Rhythm, they were experimenting with this rhythmic stuff for a long time. But what they didn't do, with a couple of exceptions, Beethoven and Bach maybe did a couple of pieces just because they were so far ahead of their time in actual syncopated kind of ragtime. Like they were the first raggers. But what we did in America was we took this syncopated feel and we invented a whole style around it. So instead of occasionally doing that and then the rest are regular marching time, we're just like, we're going to dance all the time. And it created this new type of dance music that was a worldwide sensation. And everyone was totally entranced with this new, well, they were very smitten and entranced by the new world. I'm talking the late 1800s, early before World War I, which really kind of was a big change in everything. Everyone was a lot more optimistic. Times were hard, things weren't great, but there was this, we were out of the Industrial Revolution. Cars and airplanes were invented, and all of a sudden we were connected in ways that had never been connected before. We were this cross-cultural, for what some people call it a melting pot, for lack of a better term, which is kind of a bad word in some circles. But there was something fresh and exciting about what was happening in America at the time, and the whole world wanted a piece of it. And they were trying to figure out, and they loved it, and they were enamored by it. And one of the main things that represented that was the music. So ragtime became a sensation around the world. And composers, classical composers, Debussy, Ravel, all these guys that were popular in the early 1900s, they wanted a piece of it. And they started composing in these ragtime styles. That was a whole new thing. And it was partially represented with the Black community, the sort of the Negro vibe that was coming out of the plantation stuff. And for the most part, when I was a kid, we are taught that ragtime and jazz in particular is black music, is from Black Americans. And I never had any reason to question that. I didn't really care. So Scott Joplin, who's called the king of ragtime, who wrote those two pieces, The Maple Leaf Rag and The Entertainer, there's a movie, I know I'm going all over the place. There's a movie that came out in the 70s called The Sting. It won Best Picture. It stars Robert Redford and Paul Newman. And it was a sensation during my parents' generation. And it was about these gamblers, and the sting was like a sting operation they did. And it was, in the 70s, it was made to be like in the teens, 20s, 1920. So old, the old vibe, and everyone kind of loved it. It was this, anyway, it used Scott Joplin's music as the soundtrack. And all of a sudden, this essentially forgotten Black American composer and this style that had been overshadowed very quickly by jazz. Well, not quickly, because it was around for 20, 30 years, but jazz sort of took over, and it was post-recording era. So a lot of these early ragtime songs were never recorded because the technology literally didn't exist, or it was so early that it was so bad that no one really even wanted to listen to it anymore. By the time jazz came around, the technology was much better, and the songs then became recorded, and that way you could share them, and those are the ones that are remembered. So when this movie came out in the 70s, it caused this massive revival and interest in ragtime music again, just because it shows how much influence that Hollywood can have. And for once, they actually did us a favor, Hollywood, can you believe it? And they helped revive an interest in this important old genre. So why am I going on this tangent diet? You asked about ragtime. It's your fault. So in the 90s, in the 80s, I should say, in the 80s and 90s, this was after that movie, and this is when I was growing up. We didn't have the Hollywood movies that were as popular anymore. We had video games. We grew up with playing Nintendo, playing PlayStation, doing that. And in those video games, I was hearing dun 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 dun. So that's Mario, and that was composed by Koji Kondo, and a Japanese composer. He's still around, works for Nintendo. And in 1985, he wrote these early iconic Mario themes based off of American ragtime. And so when people are playing these in all these video games, and a whole style of music has come from that, they're actually enjoying and listening to ragtime, and they just have no idea because it's not called that, but it certainly is that in its inherently in the style. So I was growing up hearing these ragtime songs and in video games, and I had to learn them. So I started playing them. And so these video games actually caused yet another ragtime revival in America. And so fast forward to I'm touring around the world, and I'm playing like Mario songs for people in Russia and stuff, and they're going crazy. But then I found out something, and this is sort of to tie the little bow on this, my diatribe here. What I found that was the most profound experience about going and seeing other cultures, which was amazing for me to be able to do that, was the pride that each country had in their own musical heritage. Okay.
Yeah.
As a classical, as an American, I should say, we don't have hundreds of years of history. Well, we have 250 years of history, but there's something deeper that is in these cultures in Europe that goes back a really long time. And the composers, the great classical music composers from even just 100 years ago or so, were able to capture that the music of those cultures in a way that is far more profound and deep seated in our psyches than a lot of people realize. I'll explain. So, like, for example, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Edvard Grieg. He's a Norwegian composer. A lot of people know him from the Peer Gynt Suite. In the Hall of the Mountain King is probably his most famous piece. Right? He's probably Norway's greatest classical composer. He lived around 1900, was composing. I was obsessed with his piano concerto. He wrote up a one piano concerto in A minor. I was obsessed with it when I was 10. I just wanted to learn it and play with an orchestra. That's all I wanted to do in my life, was learn to play the Grieg piano concerto. My family were driven mad by it because I was constantly playing it. That's how obsessed I was. So Grieg was like my favorite composer. And when we were in Norway, like we were in his hometown, I think Bergen, and there's statues of him everywhere. Like he's just like, he's a god, not like a god, but he's this, music captures something that is so intangible. And for those that don't have the training and the experience and the ear, it is almost like it has magical powers. Like go back 600-700 years. You're a peasant and all you know is the sound of cows pooping. Like literally, like that's it. You only know the sound
when they poop.
Yeah, you know what I'm trying. Whatever.
Okay.
Cows farting. Okay.
Okay.
All you know is the sounds of a farm.
Yeah.
I grew up on a farm, so let me just say
Okay.
there's a lot of flatulent sounds that happen on a farm. Okay.
Okay.
So all you know is the sounds of the world, the crude world around you. Not that the world is crude, but certainly as a peasant in 1300, it was probably not the best situation. All of a sudden, you walk into a Gothic cathedral, which of course by itself is going to be the most insane thing you've ever seen, and then you hear this choral music from inside with these harmonies resonating all around you. I can tell you that would have been a completely transcendental experience, right? That's why these churches are built as almost sound resonators, because when this music, it can basically lift you up into heights. And even if you were just this peasant, like you would come in there and you would have a religious experience, and music is a very important way that happens. So music can unlock a cultural memory, even if you don't even know that you have it, right? So kids today, they've grown up in Norway, they might not even know, Grieg or anything, but there's something about that music that unites them. And especially in the face of, dare I say it, the homogenization of cultures around the world, where everything is now becoming assimilated, for lack of a better term, and people are losing connections to their past, to their history, to their culture. And music is one of the most important and enduring ways that you can hold on to that. And so I found that out in a big way when we're playing in Norway, for example, and we're playing our jazz, and I'm playing, a little of the ragtime and stuff, and the audience loves it. But then all of a sudden, I'll start playing the Grieg piano concerto in A minor. Dun, 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 I would play, and the freaking place exploded. And of course, my bandmates, because this was like during my little solo, right? They have no idea. They didn't have classical training. They're just like, oh, there he goes again. And what I'm doing is I'm sharing the music with them that was special to me. And after all these shows, they'd be like, that was not only the highlight of our night, that was like one of our life highlights, because they were like, you brought your music to us, but then you showed that our music made it to you. Does that make sense? So this idea of music and art in general as a way for cultures to share ideas, but also keeping their culture separate. Not to say that like musical fusion is bad or anything, but the idea that you can have your cultural history and we can have ours, and we can relish and appreciate both of them. That is something that is powerful and even dangerous, I would dare to suggest, to the powers that be, because it keeps our identity strong. When they want to take that identity from us and digitize it and do all whatever, well, that starts with attacking who we are and who you are and who your roots are. So I went to, when we were in Finland, I played music by John Sibelius. Sibelius is their great composer. And when I was in Prague, I played music by Smetana, Bedřich Smetana, which is the Czech great composer that they idolize. He wrote a piece called The Moldau, which is about the river that runs through Prague. And it's basically their unofficial national anthem. It's a gorgeous classical orchestral work. And I played a clip of it. Actually, someone videoed it. It's on you. Clip of it is actually on YouTube. And this is like 10 years ago. And you have never heard a louder crowd, I swear to God, than when I started playing that. It was, you couldn't even hear me play. And of course, my band is like looking at each other, being like, what is he doing again? Because they didn't know the piece. And then but the audience is like, they knew it. They knew what I was doing. And so anyway, these moments are like the highlights of my career for sure. And like in Russia, I played Rachmaninoff and they lost it. I played some Tchaikovsky. They lost it because this was their culture, right? Okay, ragtime, that's our American culture. I know that sounds silly, and a lot of people think it's jazz, right? They're like, oh, jazz is first. Well, actually, ragtime came first. Jazz evolved from ragtime. But yes, I would include jazz in that. And we don't have 500 years of great classical composers to draw from because we only existed for half of that time. And our classical music in the 1800s was still kind of developing. And it got, I should say, infiltrated even by all these different cultures. We had Irish people here. We had German people here. We had Italian people here. We had Scottish and English. We had African American people here. We had all these different cultures. And what ended up happening was this hilarious, and I say hilarious because some of this music is hilarious, back and forth of parody, satire, making fun of each other racially, culturally, through music. So a lot of these songs are very spicy. They're by Black people making fun of white people and by white people making fun of Black people. But here's what's interesting is that most of this music has been completely wiped from existence. A lot of it's never been recorded. And most of it is it's dismissed as racist, essentially. But if you actually look at and listen to these songs, I would say it's almost anti-racist in that they used humor to make a difficult, tension-filled situation. They lowered the pressure valves a little bit because people were laughing and singing. And what was great about the early ragtime jazz musicians, they didn't care about race. They cared, could you play? Could you sing? Could you write a good song? That was what was most important. And that was what was American. Now, to sort of, again, tie this up, I swear I'm almost done here. This has been taken from us a little bit in that it's been racially reframed, at least in America, in American education, that all this music belongs to blacks, to Black people, to Black Americans. Granted, there were some great early innovators of jazz and ragtime who were absolutely Black and who were writing some of the best stuff. However, in my research that I've mostly kind of really done a deep dive in the last few years now, I found that, well, it was actually white Americans that were at the very forefront of this innovation, and that we, in fact, were doing it first. Not to say, oh, I don't want to make this a competition. I want the truth. Like, I played this styles for 20 years thinking, oh, I'm appropriating Black. I was told in college that I was appropriating Black people's music by playing ragtime and jazz, and I shouldn't do it. I was discouraged by more than one type of person. And I just think that's racist, first of all. They're like saying I can't do something because I'm white. I mean, that's really what they're saying. And I have now found that actually the first ragtime composers, the first ragtime singers, the first ragtime performers, they were white. And it was a collaborative effort between whites, Blacks, and Germans, Italians. The first jazz band was a white Italian band. They were Italian Americans. And this is all part of the record, right? Not to say that there weren't this was, in a nutshell, ragtime and jazz are our American cultural heritage. Just like Bach and Beethoven are for Germany, and Austria has Mozart and Chopin, and has from France has they have these legacies, and they've tried to deny America they're trying to deny those legacies, trying to erase them, which is why, again, they reacted so strongly when I played Rachmaninoff and Grieg and all that. But similarly, in America, they say, "Oh, you don't have a culture. You don't have you're all mutts, right? And you came over. You're all immigrants and mutts and everything." When America absolutely has her own culture. Our culture is standing up against the oppressors. We started our own thing. I'm saying we, but I have family going back. I know it's kind of cliche, but going back to the Mayflower and the early boats that came over. I'm up from all over the place. I'm actually Croatian through my dad's side. I come from a Croatian noble family a few hundred years ago. So I'm part Croatian, and then I'm Scottish on my mom's side, Scottish and French. But I have family in America going back like 300 plus years, right? Which is a long time. And we are cut off from our history and told that our heritage is founded in slavery and racism and all. And this is what I was taught growing up. And I was just like, okay, I didn't know any better. And then I found out, well, actually, a lot of that stuff is just not true at all. And some of it's just pernicious lies. And as a musician, I realized, as someone who, people ask me, why do you play all this old timey music and all that stuff? Well, fun. First of all, it's fun. And I'm kind of like hyperactive in general, ADD type. So it's this constant stimulation of that rhythm. It never lets up. Right. So that's why it draws me. I get bored with some classical music. I'm just playing. I'm like, all right, this is slow or whatever. This is the same repetitive thing. With the ragtime and early jazz stuff, it gives you a lot more freedom. You can improvise, you can follow the note for note, but you can also improvise. It can be swung. It can also be straight rhythm. It can be whatever you want it to be. There's a lot of freedom there. And that is represented by America, because it was this unshackling, for lack of a better term, of these European styles. And we were like, well, actually, we can do a little twist. And the Black people were like, we're going to do these little dances and make fun of it. And then white people were like, well, we're going to make fun of the Black people, making fun of the white people. So there was this constant back and forth of riffing on each other, kind of like rap battles for the day of today is really what it was. But they were using terms that are now deemed to be racist and whatever today. But back then they were just normal terms that were not considered to be that, right? So this entire genre of music has essentially been eliminated, again, for being racist. But really what it was it reflected the relentless optimism of America at the time in the face of adversity, right? So what was so novel, I think, it is, look, here's the rub. Here's the confusion a lot of people have when they hear ragtime. They think of old-timey jingles and ice cream trucks and early jazz or whatever and silly stuff. The most important and most popular music of the early jazz ragtime era were songs. The songs. I mean, if you turn on the radio, you're going to hear someone singing 99% of the time, right? Or someone talking, but right? Popular music is not usually instrumental. Even in the classical time, people were going to see operas. Like, they didn't really want to go see an orchestra play. They wanted to go see a musical. They wanted to see human beings singing, talking, acting out a play, but not just instrumental. So that's the same today. Popular music is songs. It's not just instrumental tracks, which are sure occasionally popular, right? So the ragtime era was actually defined by songs, but none of them are remembered, partly because the technology didn't exist yet to record them, but partly is because it comes from this, quote, racist time that has a lot of racial imagery and a lot of racial content, partly, again, because that's what America was dealing with. America was dealing with all these different cultures living with each other. In fact, a lot of the early rags are straight up Irish English jigs. They sound like sea shanties and airs. They're basically Irish people coming over and being like, well, we're going to do it in this style here in America. So for the first time, people were hearing these classical motifs, these classical musical ideas paired with lyrics that were often funny, irreverent, offensive, stupid, like, or even just like like I'm like hard, like dang, my wagon just broke down and now I got to go to jail and my baby left me. But unlike the blues, which came about 30 years after ragtime, okay, so blues is later. People think blues, no, blues came later. Blues is all just sad music, sad song. I'm feeling low, my vibration is going down. Ragtime is the opposite. The lyrics are often life sucks, I'm gonna die, my baby left me. But the music is like, life sucks, I'm gonna die, my baby left me. And there was this dichotomy that it presented that almost like it wakes you up out of your slumber, right? It's like you're at one hand, you're wanting to dance, and the other hand, you're like, yeah, life is just shit. It really is. But there's something, it just makes you want to take that next step, next foot forward. And I think there was something about that optimism that captured the world, and the world wanted a piece of it. This idea of in the face of adversity, you could still be dancing. That was what America represented. That was American exceptionalism. And it was a little bit of this sort of rustic white Appalachian Americana. It was the Negro plantation vibe. It was the Irish jigs, Scottish jigs. It was the German, Italian, French classical music traditions, all fused together to create something new. And that then made jazz, rock and roll, and pop music today. It's a direct line. The pop music that we hear on the radio today, for better or for worse, takes straight from this syncopated ragtime rhythm that we founded and started as a global sensation in America. And that is our cultural, that's what we are proud of. And I didn't even really know that when I was touring around the world 10 years ago. I mean, I kind of did, but now I'm like, I recognize that that is important, so much more important. Like, so my job as a musician, I think, is to preserve and show how these styles and this sort of combining hard, sad things, like singing about COVID, but in a way that was like, I'm smiling, I got a bounce in it. I feel like that really resonated with people and helped people sing about these tough topics, but with a twinkle in my eye and a smile. It helps cut through some of the blinders that people have. It cuts through that, and it's powerful, and it's a powerful this. So using satire, playing this sort of court jester role, that's something that societies have had for thousands of years. This idea that you could actually make fun of the king to his face is important, not only for the people that are listening, it's the audience. It's also important for the king, because the monarch needs there to be a pressure valve release for the masses, because if they're not allowed to laugh and smile at the absurdity of the inequality of their situation, then they revolt and they kill the monarch. That has happened time and time again. When a monarch goes too hard, he generally gets screwed, or his kids do, or eventually it bubbles over. But when you allow a certain amount of mockery and this type of stuff, it benefits everybody. And so we saw them become that bad monarch many times in history, but certainly in the COVID era, they were like, no, you can't even make fun of us. You can't make fun of masks. You can't do any of that, or you get arrested depending on where you are, right? So satire and parody become not only something that is fun for recreational, it becomes essential for the survival of a free society. So I'm done. That's my TED talk. I mean, come on. You asked me what ragtime is, and then I went on like that thing, that spiel.
No, I loved it. So look, so when somebody listens to music, right? When I listen to music, I really enjoy it. I like the sound of it, the performance, everything. When your songs, so piano, everything is great. But I have to listen to your songs with pen and paper, because I'm like, oh my God, Boston bombing, there were fake blood. just writing down. Oh my god, Christmas songs. There's just so much information is there. You can't just sit and relax. You're like, my curiosity just spikes. So I'm like super happy that you're here, so we can just go one by one, and then just like I want to hear your take on all those interesting topics. But before that, I want to ask you, because when in one of the posts you mentioned that it is difficult to match the notes to the lyrics to the notes, because the way that when you sing, rationally one can tell that there's a lot of work behind your songs, but you make it look so easy. If when you do it, it's just so easy. But obviously, I can see you're playing piano. You're at the same time the lyrics they're not just any words. There's story being told, and then matching the tunes. It's everything is so difficult, but at the same time looks so easy. Can you just kind of like walk us through how do you make your songs?
Sure.
How much what goes behind the
Well,
scenes?
that's a great question, because it is that marriage of sound, music, and words is far more difficult, powerful, and potent than people realize. Words are spelling. We have the word magic spells. That's the same word, right? English is very much also most languages are, but English is a very crafted language to have the sort of spell-like quality, which is why it is so often used as in pop lyrics. Even in other countries, they like to sing songs in English, not just because it's a popular language, but there's something about it that has this extra quality of magic behind it. Not to say that is a good or worst thing, it just is a thing. So I, as someone who was mostly music oriented as a kid, I was classically trained on the piano. I had this sort of haughty perception. In fact, when they say, "Oh, talk about songs for musicals or something," someone like Rodgers and Hammerstein, people like that, Gilbert and Sullivan, these usually you have a composer and a lyricist, if that makes sense. Especially these old songs, right? You would have someone to do the music and someone to do the words. And I always thought that was kind of strange. I mean, why do you need two different people to do something that should just be a song? Like, I think about a songwriter, it's someone who writes a song, and they don't need a team of people to do it. And I kind of had this almost better, holier than thou bias that musicians were better than lyricists. Does that make sense? Like, I sort of thought that the creation of music was more magical than just choosing some words to put. And then of course, you could say, you're just picking some notes. We have to pull from the whole language, right? As a lyricist, right? So I can see it both ways. But I remember when I started writing songs when I was quite young, the music would always come to me quite easily, but the lyrics I really struggled with. And I found that it just is awkward sometimes to choose the right words, right? So one of the hobbies I have also is I like to play Scrabble. I like to play Scrabble.
Oh.
So I play a lot of word games. So I've been studying the words for a long time. And I kind of say that I play professionally, even though I don't really. I make money from it by playing online, or I have over the years. But I'm not an official player. In fact, the official Scrabble World Championship is happening right now as we speak in Africa, and several of my friends are in it. I probably would never be able to win it, but if I ever did an official tournament, I probably could place quite well. So my skills are pretty high, but that involves a lot of study of words, just the combination of letters and how they sounding them out phonetically in my head. So this word obsession of mine it happened after I started writing songs. I started writing songs earlier, but I feel like it's sort of not that I was able to use fancier words. I just started to learn how certain words have certain auras. If that's weird, they have a certain vibe. They have a certain, just the word itself, you can, not that it's good or bad, but they have certain energies around them, right?
Yeah.
And then when you use these words in certain ways, they can have, I mean, lawyers know this more than anything. Like, words have a lot of power. And if the sort of legalese is its own language, well, Lyric writing is its own language, where you might think, oh, this, if you read the lyrics of a generic pop song, I mean, granted, a lot of them are trash, but sometimes you'll read the words and they're just looking like, these are really common words. There's nothing very innovative about this. This is just whatever. But then you try to write something like that yourself using common words, make catchy phrases, you're going to find out that it's way harder than it looks. They have to flow. They have to have a cadence. They have to sound, again, it's almost like it's a magic spell. What it sounds like is almost more important than what it's actually saying, if that makes sense, right? Because the words themselves might be saying something, but how does it sound? Especially pretend like you don't even speak English or the language it's being sung in. How is it going to sound? That's why we have chants and all these stuff to evoke these different feelings and moods and stuff. So another thing that has inspired in my songwriting is, again, to go back to the ragtime song era, where in the old days, they couldn't rely on fancy recordings. They couldn't rely on high production value. They couldn't rely on tricks to, in this recording studio to make things sound new or novel or anything. The songs had to just exist as notes on paper. In other words, sure, they might have a fancy cover art and stuff for these old songs, but if they wanted to write a hit song, you couldn't have like a sexy lady record it for you. No, you couldn't, again, use a recording studio to make it sound whatever, have a whole band playing. The song just had to exist on its own merit, and it had to tell a story. Most of these old songs, they told a story. They're evocative of something. I'm a little side thing. I'm doing a silent movie night thing where I actually used to do it more often, where I take silent movies, silent films, old, Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, which don't have any music for them. They're just silent movies, right? There was no music scores for these movies. And when you would play them in a theater, you would have a live musician there. There would be a piano player or an organ player, or there would be an whole orchestra, and they would just play their own version in the actual theater. You would actually get a live music performance with the thing. So you would actually get a very different experience if you see a movie in New York versus Idaho, the same film. It's just you get the local flavor of that musician who is playing. So one of the things I like to do is write my own soundtracks essentially for these silent films. And I'm actually doing locally one coming up soon where we're showing a movie and I'm playing along with the soundtrack into our live audience. People don't realize how fun that is until you actually do it. Like, cause I put jokes in everything, and these movies are way better than people realize. Like they put a lot, again, they couldn't rely on CGI, on AI, on fancy. They had to have clever stories, brilliant visual gags, crazy stunts. They blow up entire trains and stuff, and like it would cost them so much money, but just to get that one shot on film, like there was so much care they put into this stuff. So anyway, I'm gonna be streaming one soon. I'm coming up. I'm gonna do this movie called Steamboat Bill Jr. by Buster Keaton from 1928, and the movie is actually based off of a song written in 1910 called Steamboat Bill. So written 18 years earlier, this song was enough to inspire a movie 18 years later. And it's considered one of the top 100 best movies ever made. It's just an absolute masterpiece. It's a riot. It has that famous scene of where Buster Keaton's standing there and the house facade falls on him and he's in the window and the window goes right on top of him and he stands there and it's very iconic. So my point is I learned the song, this Steamboat Bill song from 1910 for the movie so I could play it in the soundtrack. I can add it because it's based off of the song, right? And it's so delightful. Like the song itself, it's very simple. The melody's pretty simple. The chords are very basic, but there's a very strong syncopation, ragtime syncopated rhythm in there that is almost unique and it's extremely catchy. and the song tells a story. It evokes, it has 3 verses. It's about this guy Steamboat Bill, and he's on a race with a bigger and better and newer ship, and he keeps putting stuff in the boiler, and then a gambler comes and he bets him he can't do it. And he's like, I can do it. And then the boiler explodes, and it sends both Steamboat Bill and the gambler in the air, and they're flying in the air, and the guy's like, they're like, oh wow, how do we get here? And the Steamboat Bill's like, I'll bet you that I'll go higher than you, right? So the gambling continues as they're flying up in the air, and then the wife is all sad, and she's like, she tells her kids, she's like, yeah, I'm gonna have to marry a railroad man now, no more of the steamboat guys. And so it's just this is funny, and anyway. So this idea that a song can tell a story using clever rhythms, clever lyrics, all that stuff used to be the way it's done. Not to say that people aren't writing good stuff anymore, but it's no longer about that. It's about whatever. I don't need to tell you how bland the pop music industry is, but I think this idea of just someone in their house dicking around, singing silly stuff is very appealing to a lot of people. And I wrote, even today, I was going through my old song folder. I have this folder. It's huge. I must have written 1,000 songs. I don't know. I have to count. And maybe 2/3 of them are trash, or I've forgotten most of them. I just don't remember them anymore. And that's just how it is with most things. There's so much trial and error, so much. So like you said, I make it look easy, but that's because I've done this for so long, and I'm still learning. I'm still improving in certain ways and forgetting some things and whatever. And so, I think I've learned now to really appreciate lyricists, really appreciate them. And now I understand why, the great songwriters, I should say the great composers, would often need a lyricist to collaborate with, because it's a whole different can of worms. It really is. And it's one that I had to develop into way longer than music, which came to me quite quickly. With the words, I sort of poo-pooed them, but then now I realize how much power that they actually have. Not just with catchy phrases, but like you said, singing about the Boston bombing and things like that, and a little catchy little thing, like people, it catches you off guard, and it lowers your inhibitions. People are accustomed to listening to music as just pleasure or background stuff. So they're already in this alpha state. They're already in this, they're more susceptible, right? Which is why the pop industry is so dangerous, how it's so degenerate, the sexual violence, all that stuff. And what is so fascinating, and here's another plug for the ragtime era, in all of these songs, zero sexual degeneracy, not even close. They would never, ever. In fact, there's a famous court case with a song called Dora Dean from 1896. And in it, he calls her Dora Dean, the hottest gal you've ever seen. And a judge determined that could not be copyrighted because that is offensive to refer to a woman that way. That cannot be a popular song for children. And the judge said in his thing, he said, this might not seem like that bad just to call a woman hot, but if we let this happen, and further down the line, the music is going to get more and more sexualized. And it's going to have
here we are.
And here we are. So what's so interesting is that this music from the era that I play, that is called racist and terrible and has all this stuff, is actually singing about family values and family. And so I just did this song by a Black composer's lyricist, and it's like a lullaby written about how the father loves to come home to his little Black babies. That's what the song is literally about. But that song hasn't been recorded in 100 years and is considered racist because of some of the imagery and the words used, even though it is by Black composers celebrating traditional family values and honoring that. And they call me racist for singing that song. And yet look at gangster rap today. So that is, it's so interesting how popular music has changed over the years, where it now is, it celebrates this type of degeneracy, and people are so used to hearing. And then there's the irony, right? Where I get kicked off of YouTube a few years ago, and I got kicked off of all these stuff for doing my satire songs, half of which I'm kind of, I don't even really believe, I'm just joking around. And yet these artists, I'm not to say, oh, woe is me, but these pop artists, they sing about the worst stuff imaginable, and they get millions of dollars and they get promoted everywhere. And again, I don't really want millions of dollars, but I do think that there's stories like mine, because there's a lot of people that have gone through similar, a lot of artists, especially in the last few years, that have had worse things happen to them. I mean, I feel like I'm lucky in a lot of respects, but the stuff that I've gone through, it's like, it shows that something isn't right with the way that all this is working, that I have to be existing on pins and needles. And, you know, even the song that I just did that Candace retweeted, I'm like, am I going to get sued for that? Like, I'm not, that's a real question, but I'm serious, because people are getting sued for over saying stuff that I'm singing, essentially. And hopefully the song, and not that, and so people, my critics will often say, you know, you're just using music to hide behind your racist whatever. And I'm like, okay, but you know, why is South Park able to make fun of every race, religion, and they're just like, oh, that's just South Park? I'm like, okay, just because they have $1 billion like deal with whatever company, is that so that Paramount or whatever, they get a free pass? Like, because I'm not signed to a record label, then I don't get a chance to have that same type of. So anyway, I grew up watching South Park in the 90s. It came out when I was in 7th grade. And I'm like, they're singing about how I remember Kyle in the South Park, he's singing out, oh, it sucks I'm a Jew on Christmas. All my Santa passes over my house. I'm eating latkes. And I'm 13. I'm like, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. They're using music to tease stuff that we're not supposed to tease. And it's so funny. And I'm like, all right, I gotta do this. So that's the Foundring origin story right there.
Wow. Well, let's talk about YouTube, right? So you were on YouTube, and then I saw some of your videos that were deleted. Now you re-uploaded them, and they were just music. You're playing piano. Why were they deleted?
So there's a long. I'll try to condense this. I have the channel. Don't ban me, YouTube, again. The channel that I have now was a backup channel I made in 2016. So I'm technically banned from making new channels. That's what they
Really?
say. Yes.
Wait, what? Why?
Well, so because my original Foundring channel that I started in 2006 was deleted in January 2023. So we're almost 3 years ago. But in the height of sort of the COVID stuff still, even in January 2023. So they removed my entire channel for hate speech, And I didn't even get the 3 strikes. So to go back, I started doing those anti-war and even some anti-bankster songs, 2007, 2008, 2009. But my channel was very tiny, and no one was really watching them, right? And I started, but I was also doing ragtime stuff. So I was playing Mario songs and actually getting some viral, like I had a couple viral videos in 2009, like even before viral was even a thing. And it was mostly just sort of the fun. It was like the Animaniacs song where I was singing the countries, the capitals. And I did one where I sing all the elements. There's a great American songwriter named Tom Lehrer, who just passed away a few months ago, almost 100 years old. He's kind of like the guy that I'm most like in terms of what I do as Foundring. You could say that I try to be humble, but mostly because there aren't very many people doing this type of content anymore. But I'm probably the one person who's closest to representing what he was doing in the 50s and 60s, where he was singing quite offensive things, even for the time, but musical satire. He was very clean shaven. He was a professor at Harvard. So he was a very, like, he came from the establishment, but then totally rejected the establishment and was singing against it, and even was totally disillusioned with the political movement, the hippie movement of the 60s and 70s, and he just checked out and stopped writing music. Anyway, one of Tom Lehrer's famous pieces he did was he sings every element from the periodic table. There's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and hydrogen, and oxygen, and nitrogen, and rhenium, and nickel, neodymium, neptunium, germanium, and iron, americium, ruthenium, uranium. So he goes through all the elements in a very clever way. And people are like, oh, that's easy to do. Well, no. Arranging the elements in a way that it just flows out of your tongue is an extraordinarily difficult thing to do. I mean, it takes a certain type of genius to really be able to do that. And the guys that did the TV show The Animaniacs that carried on that tradition of songs that list a lot of random things were directly inspired by Tom Lehrer's work. And they kind of even redid some of his songs. So that same idea of United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Haiti, Jamaica, Peru, that is very brilliant spellcraft songwriting. To be able to do that is very hard. So I covered Tom Lehrer's Element song, antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and then I added a new verse. This is like 2012, I think. Added a new verse because since he wrote the song, we had discovered new elements, about 15 or 16. So I was like, oh, I gotta expand it, right? So I added, I only had to write one short verse compared to the whole thing. So it wasn't that hard, but it went viral, it got like 100,000 views or something. So that my channel started to get known for things like that. And then, but I started to notice whenever I did anything slightly political, YouTube was essentially shadow banning the videos. Like I was noticing that it wouldn't show up in searches. I even documented my view counts going down on some of the videos. So they were removing views on them, but they weren't doing it to my Mario stuff, right? It was only the stuff that, and I wasn't even, like, the stuff was very tame, especially compared to some of my songs today. It was very just like, I was afraid. I didn't even have my real name associated. I wanted to stay anonymous, even though I had my face. It was still early days of the internet where you could actually be anonymous that way. You didn't have to dox yourself necessarily, even with showing your face. So I noticed something was off with my YouTube account about 12 years ago, and kind of talked about it, but people were that wasn't a thing, right? It wasn't. I should say I noticed that around 2008 or 9. So almost 20 years ago, I noticed that YouTube was censoring my account, whether or not it was a human being or whether or not it was sort of the algo, or I'm not sure, right? But if you talked about that at the time, people they thought you were crazy,
What were you talking about? What were the ones that
so the songs in particular, it would be like, I wrote a couple that were critical of the Iraq War, anti-Iraq war. I wrote some inspired by the financial crisis of 2008. So things like that, which was more just like, they were kind of just generic protest songs, but nothing that was, it didn't tread on anything too dangerous. So in 2013, in fact, I actually just randomly shared this on my Twitter today. I randomly we were talking about, you make hundreds of videos and you don't know what goes viral. It is what it is. So I made a random song showing a video, doing kind of a ragtime boogie woogie version of In the Hall of the Mountain King, the piece by Edvard Grieg. Da 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 da, right? But I did a little boogie woogie version, and then I showed it was the same as the theme song. See how these TV shows are, the theme song for the TV show Inspector Gadget. Bum ba bum ba ba, Inspector Gadget. Dun 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 dun. Woo, woo, right? That is just a swung version, kind of a ragtimeified jazz version of In the Hall of the Mountain King by Edvard Grieg. Just to show that these old melodies are constantly recycled and stuff. So I made a silly video showing that, just doing one theme and then doing the other, and it totally blew up. It got on the front page of Reddit back when Reddit was, before it was still broken, and it got 600,000 views in a day, which was insane in 2013 because I think I had only one video even hit 100,000 after 7 years on YouTube. I had only one video get 100,000. All of a sudden, in 24 hours, I had 600,000 views. And I was like, oh, I was overwhelmed. All these people was contacting me. They're like wanting to collab. And I'm like, this is before I had joined the band, like the big band and stuff. So I was still just a nobody, right? And it was around that time that I got invited to my first ragtime festival. And I met one of my idols and became my mentor. He's a great ragtime pianist, probably the greatest living ragtime pianist. His name is Tom Breyer. And old internet people will remember him as he was famous for playing video game music, sight read. Sight reading means you have never seen it before, and the music is put in front of your face, and you just play it for the first time. And he was a savant at that. And so he had people that would put Mario music in front of him, sheet music. He had never seen before, but he was this kind of quirky, nerdy savant type. He wasn't very social. He had some social awkward stuff, and one of those just brilliant people, right? And he would create these 10-minute masterpieces from 2 pages of music that he's never seen before. And many of them went viral with millions of views on the early days of the internet. So I have been following his work for years, and I was a huge fan of him. I didn't even know really who he was or where he was, but I got a message from someone on YouTube. I think probably after that went viral, that In the Hall of the Mountain King video went viral, and said, you need to come to the Ragtime Festival and you should meet Tom Breyer. And so I went that year, 2013, to my first festival, and I met him, and he was like he was like a god. And I ended up staying with him and studying with him for the next several years, a bunch of times. And he helped and get me invited to other festivals. Sadly, because we live in clown world, and it's probably one of the worst things that's happened to music in general. I don't say that lightly. In the last 50 years, is that he was in a car accident in 2016 and had got a brain injury and basically lost his ability to play, which is tragic, not only just for the ragtime scene in general and all the people that he was inspiring, but he was a brilliant composer. He is a brilliant composer. He has written, maybe 300-400 incredible works. So anyway, as I was experiencing this sort of success, I noticed then my channel was getting, even after that 600,000 views, it was getting worse. The manipulation or whatever was going on, and I was trying to document it, but it was hard to tell what was happening. I couldn't really catch them. They were whatever. Again, I was getting messages from people almost daily. I've been unsubscribed. I mean, people hear that a lot, right? People are like, hey, I've been unsubscribed from this channel, and I didn't, so people were saying that YouTube was unsubscribing them. And I noticed that my follower count was dropping and stuff, and all this was sketchy. So I felt that my account was being targeted. So then I decided that I needed to pull out the stops. And in 2014, I kind of went nuclear. And I did that Foil song, the one that I think you saw.
Oh, that's my favorite song.
Yes. So that's the first one where Foundring really brought out the knives. Let me just put it that way. So in a nutshell, and this is another story that could take an hour to tell, but I spend a lot of time on Reddit. I know that's kind of embarrassing to admit these days, but in the early day, in 2007, 6, 7, 8, 9, Reddit was actually a pretty amazing place. And there was a lot of really bright people that were there. And I was able to meet some pretty incredible people there. I mean, it's how my in the Hall of Mountain King video went viral in the first place. But I was spending a lot of time posting and studying about conspiracies on Reddit. So I made up another name because I had a Foundring account to talk about music on Reddit. But then I decided I didn't want Foundring to be associated with conspiracies. I mean, I was doing some anti-war stuff, but I wanted my stuff. I took myself, hard to believe, I took myself seriously once as a musician, and I was trying to be serious. I wanted to do the ragtime and this what we call stride piano, and I was getting into boogie woogie and these styles, and I wanted to perform that kind of stuff. I also wanted to do Tom Lehrer Animaniac stuff, singing the elements, because that's where my skill is. I have a good memory and I have a good diction for singing, right? So this sort of rapid fire, almost rap like delivery is hard, and it takes. And I was getting good at it, and so I wanted to do that, but YouTube would not let me. I think they, and again, I don't want to say that like, oh, some shadowy room and people are like, let's get that Foundring guy. I think I just got pushed into the algo, into the, yeah, this guy has had some questionable songs. Let's maybe not promote his channel anymore. So I think that's what ended up happening to me. And it was frustrating because I had put so much time and energy into it. And I felt like it was all for naught. And it was particularly frustrating because I wasn't even monetized. I wasn't making money from it. So I was making YouTube money. And I was making money for them, in other words. And I just wanted to make the music and get the exposure and meet people. And it worked because I did get to go meet Tom Breyer and then eventually get picked up by Postmodern Jukebox. But by 2014, I knew something was wrong. So I decided, all right, Foundring he's going to now embrace this other side that has been trying to keep different. And we're just going to see what happens. And so Weird Al released this album. And obviously Weird Al is another well-known parody guy, but he certainly doesn't really do the sort of the real spicy parody that someone like Tom Lehrer would have done, Tom Lehrer before Weird Al. So he released a song or an album called Foil from the album. And it's kind of making fun of conspiracy theorists. And I'm like, okay, I see what you're doing there. I get it. Okay. Shots fired, Weird Al. Shots fired. Yeah, conspiracy theorists are lame. That's cool. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to add to this song. I'm going to add some verses. And then I just started writing and I added more and more and more. And I'm like, this is, I'm going to get in trouble for this. So I end up singing the song, making the song Foil. And I basically just shoved in every kind of conspiracy theory that I had heard that I could think of at the time to put in song form to see what would stick. And what was, I think, to pat myself on the back, what was so brilliant about it was I included a lot of totally nonsense stuff. Like there's a conspiracy theory that Keanu Reeves is actually a vampire that is hundreds of years
old. I didn't know about that.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. So there's like portraits of him that from hundreds of years ago, and it kind of looks like him. They're like, oh, is he still alive? And so obviously, let's just say I don't necessarily ascribe to that particular theory, but I included in the song, Keanu is the vampire king, just like as a throwaway line. So I had all these sort of lines in there that were just, yes, I'm actually making fun of some conspiracy theorists. I'm following the vibe with Weird Al. By singing about them and I'm making fun of them, but I also slipped in some stuff that was kind of on the nose. For example, journalist Michael Hastings, who was a American journalist who was doing a report on the Iraq War. I think it was General McGregor. It was one of these generals that was involved with the Iraq War in America. And he was doing an expose on it. Maybe it was the Afghanistan War. I can't quite remember the exact details. But Michael Hastings was like, guys, I think they're going to kill me. And he did all these, he was all sketched out, and he was worried that they had tapped his car. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, he's driving, his car drives into a tree and explodes at 2 a.m. in LA. And this was like after the day before had warned, like they're coming after me. They got my car or something. So and he had one of those newer cars. So basically the idea is they probably drove him into the tree. So I had a line, they drove Mike Hastings into a tree. So he may have been, there's credible evidence that was an assassination against a journalist here in America. I'm not saying it's 100%, but I say that's one that I think has more credibility, right? So I had this song where I'm throwing in all these things and I can kind of hide. Again, this is what my critics say. They say, you're just hiding behind satire. I'm like, yeah, actually, I'm hiding a little bit behind the satire by weeding in these little truth bombs, right? So what happened after that video was fascinating, okay? I released it at the perfect time, so Weird Al had released his album before he released any of the music videos. So we had the audio. Okay. So I was studying the audio version. So he hadn't made his music video for that song yet. Right. And I posted my video the day before his foil video was released. So I had all this attention from people searching for foil, and it made mine go viral. It went to #1. If you just search for foil, it was being seen everywhere. And it was just the right place at the right time. And they must have hit the panic button, because they froze that. They shut that video down harder than any video I've ever seen. Probably in the history of YouTube. Like, it was frozen at like a couple thousand views. Like, they froze the count for like years. And the comments were more, thousands and thousands and thousands. They just killed the video. They completely just nuked it, right? Without deleting it, they just killed it. And I remember I linked to my SoundCloud from the video description, and my SoundCloud had like 2 followers. Nobody was listening. I just had as an extra thing, I would throw stuff on SoundCloud, right? SoundCloud even wasn't even that big at the time, right? So I put a link to my SoundCloud from the YouTube video, and my SoundCloud got like 50,000 plays on that song, right? So in other words, it was going viral on SoundCloud as well through the YouTube, which was #1 on Google for the word foil. Like, I went on Google to search for foil, and it was my song. It was just, I mean, it lasted for about 2 or 3 days, but it was enough that it blew up my video, and then YouTube shut it down. And I used metrics and stuff to sort of compare with the SoundCloud. The YouTube video must have had at least 1 million views within that first couple days, but they were showing like 2,000. So it was so in your face that I'm like, I have never seen anything like this. And I couldn't really tell anybody. I mean, I was trying, I didn't really know. I wasn't on Twitter or anything. So I'm like, all right, they really shut me down. And then every single video I made after that was dead on arrival. It was like they flipped a switch on my channel in 2014. And the next year, I did another sort of, my next big Foundring one was called Wernher von Braun. And it is about the Nazi rocket scientist Wernher von Braun, who was brought to work with the American, with NASA. He designed the rockets that basically took us to the moon, quote unquote. But he was part of Operation Paperclip, which I'm sure you know about, where we took a bunch of Nazi scientists and then we assimilated them. And Soviets took them too. We split them. We split all the best ones and then continued the Cold War. And it was all silly. So Tom Lehrer, that musical satirist that I said I styled myself after, he famously wrote a song in the 50s called Wernher von Braun, mocking the American government for taking Nazis to work with them and calling them out for their hypocrisy. And like, that took balls in the 50s. Let me just say, like, he put himself on a bunch of lists for doing that. So I took that a step further, and then I took his Wernher von Braun and I updated it. And I turned it into a 10-minute long epic where I basically go over every single coup that that American CIA has done to stop going in Syria, a coup in Iran, doing a coup in Brazil, doing a coup in Ecuador. Like, we have been implicated in all these coups of Democrat elected governments. You know, not to say that though they were all the good guys and we were always the bad guys. History is a little more complex, but it's a part of history, and it's one that is not really taught in schools. So I added to his Wernher von Braun, and I basically went through all the CIA stuff, bringing it all the way up to ISIS. And this was during Obama's presidency, right? And I remember I performed it live once and locally, this Wernher von Braun song, for a bunch of liberal ex-hippie boomers. And they start out laughing because, oh yeah, weren't we silly in the 50s when we brought over the Nazis? Ha ha ha. And then I'm getting to like the CIA polling coups like 10 years ago. And then just the room was silent. It was like you could hear a pin drop, because they were now being confronted that the silly old world is actually still the thing. So, okay. So I kind of like, I gave up on Foundring, which was timing was okay. because I randomly got picked up by Postmodern Jukebox, which is, again, one of the biggest bands on YouTube. Certainly at the time is the biggest jazz band in the world. And it was so funny because I was always, people were telling me about them, and the guy who runs the band, he's a very talented piano player named Scott Bradley, and he's a brilliant guy. And he is a good social media networker. He's got a good mind, which is I'm bad at. Has all those qualities plus the talent. And he surrounded himself with beautiful women, which was another very smart marketing move, right? So he got beautiful women to sing these songs that he was arranging, and he was doing ragtime Justin Bieber, and ragtime Taylor Swift, and ragtime Lady Gaga, and people were eating it up. He did Creep, like a slow jazz version of Radiohead's Creep. He got a sultry lady to sing it. He got like 100 million views. Like it was huge, right? And I was admittedly a little jealous. I remember I was like, oh, this guy did it right. And I'm like, oh, screw this band. Oh, I don't like Postmodern Jukebox. And then one day they called me up. They're like, hey, you want to be our touring pianist? I'm like, okay. So I had to put my foot in my mouth a little bit there. So I'm like, all right, screw this whole Foundring thing. And then I needed to make an Instagram to be a part of the band. That was one of the things. Like everyone had to have an Instagram. So I'm like, oh, I hated Facebook. I quit Facebook years ago. So I made an Instagram, and my name on tour became known as the Ragtime Rev, or the Reverend of Ragtime. Because that's like, I was all big on ragtime, right? And I'm like the ragtime guy. So I became known as the Ragtime Rev. So I started an Instagram called Ragtime Rev. And I kind of, Foundring kind of was dead for a number of years. And I toured with them for several years. I put out hundreds of videos on Instagram of me singing and playing, doing all pop songs, doing my own versions of songs. I mean, I spent a lot of time on it. I don't think I ever even broke 1,000 followers on Instagram. I mean, it was ultimately very embarrassing. Like I was working so hard, and no one was watching them. It was like no comments, nothing. I just eventually just gave up doing it. And I kind of continued doing satire songs with Foundring on my YouTube channel, but my YouTube channel was dead during the whole Russia Gate episode where they were during Trump's first presidency. They were like, Trump's a Russian agent, and that they kept saying that nonstop. I didn't vote for Trump. I liked Trump. I thought he was hilarious. I preferred him immensely over Hillary Clinton, but I wasn't a Trump supporter per se. But I saw that the campaign, the Russia thing against him, just retarded. I'm like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Like, the dude's not. And I had just I was literally in Russia. I just performed in Moscow, and like they treated us like gods. I'm not even kidding. Like they took us around all these bars, and we were getting free vodkas everywhere. And it wasn't even because we were in a famous band. It was because we were American. They were just thrilled that we were there. And they were like, they were so complimentary to me, to all of us, but they were like, thank you for playing Rachmaninoff, and thank you for playing Tchaikovsky. You shared our culture. You learned our culture, right? But they're like, you also brought America culture to us. And someone told me, said, from the first time since the fall, they were older, since the fall of the Soviet Union, it felt like they had experienced America in Russia. So in other words, I was coming from a place where, Russians are actually, they're our brothers. Like they're like, and then now, I learned that, it was the Cold War, Soviets bad, yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden it was back again. And they're like, yes, the Russians have infiltrated the government and Trump's a Russian spy. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I wrote a song called A Russian Fantasy. It's one of my favorites, Foundring originals. It's an old one from 2017 where I'm like, yeah, the Russians made your soup cold. The Russians made your coffee cold. The Russians did this. The Russians, you didn't get enough followers on Instagram. It's the Russians, So that's and it's a very silly song. And I remember people in the ragtime scene were not happy with that because they were I live in a place, a lot of liberals, right? They're like anti-Trump, like, how dare you, make light of a situation that's very serious, that the Russians have taken over America. I'm like, I don't know. You guys are the ones who are acting crazy over here. And I also did one called My NPC and Me. That's another kind of early Foundring one. But I put out a video. I'm like, I quit YouTube around 2019 because I was done. And then now here we are, COVID 2020. I have spent a lot of my conspiracy research on pandemics and how a lot of them are, if not manufactured, they're propagandized in ways and used for advantage, right? No good crisis goes to don't let a good crisis go to waste, right? So there's always some authoritarian that's going to take advantage of every situation, right? So COVID started and I'm like, okay, this is going to be one of those times. And I'm like, how do I get the word out? So I spent a lot of time online warning people, using my other accounts to sort of spread the word. Watch out. Don't take the vaccine when it comes out. I was saying things like that before it was even out. And then it got to a point where I'm like, I have to write a song about this. And I guess I have to bring back Foundring because I really had felt like Foundring, I had moved on. This was something from my youth. I had made up the character when I was a kid. It kind of like I grew out of it a little bit. I wanted to be taken a little more seriously. This was not a persona that I wanted to have forever. It was just like back in the day, in the early days of the internet, it was all about being anonymous. It wasn't about having your own thing and this was you and you got your one person. No, you had an account over here with a different name, an account over here with a different name. It was kind of the Wild West, which was what made it so fun. You could be whatever you wanted to be instead of being pigeonholed into this one identity and having to show your whole world and all the food you eat every morning. Well, no, I can actually be this guy talking about ragtime over here and this guy playing Scrabble over here. And I can be this guy talking about conspiracies over here. So I cherish that. And I really didn't want all those worlds to be combined into one persona. I wanted to keep them separate. I never wanted Foundring to do that, right? I wanted him to be a guy who wrote music that was beautiful and that people would love. I didn't want to write music to make people sad or hurt or offended even. I know that sounds weird after everything that I've done. But COVID really broke something in me and that it was just really hard. I know it was hard for lots of people for different reasons, but in California, when just everything stopped, and as someone who was a college dropout, who, I had been touring with Postmodern Jukebox, but I kind of got disillusioned with them. I had a daughter who was growing up. I would be gone 6 months out of the year. That's not a way to be a father, right? That's not. If I was younger, maybe I would have kept with it, but I told them I didn't want to do world tours anymore and only just one-offs. And that's why I almost went to Uzbekistan. I almost did these one thing, but it was not, I didn't want to keep doing those long tours, right? And so instead I decided, I'm more of a homebody anyway. And so I became a salaried church organist. So I was a church organist, salary position, worked really hard to get it. It was a good job. But then also I had monthly jazz swing nights I played at bakeries. I played all these little gigs. I had created this infrastructure, this network, this system where I could survive with doing what I loved, which is a musician. I mean, I certainly wasn't well off, but I was making it because I was able to do all these things, working with musicals in a school occasionally. But what it allowed me to do was not necessarily have that 9-to-5 obligation all the time. I could then have these gigs and I could focus on music. I could focus on developing my style of writing, but then have all these jobs that obviously I had to do, right? But that weren't necessarily taking every single hour of my day. And when COVID hit, they all went away. And not only for the temporary reason because of the lockdowns, but then when the vaccine mandates hit, right? So temporarily I was screwed because there was no more live music anymore. So I started to try to stream, but I wasn't getting people to watch I tried on Twitch and stuff, and my YouTube channel was essentially dead. So I was really in trouble. And I coasted for most of that 2020, but it really started to affect me, and especially the amount of fear that I saw around with people where I have my own theories about COVID and what it was or what it wasn't. But that's, that's a different thing. But I was not afraid of the disease. I never was from day one. In 2020, I mean, I was fairly convinced it wasn't real in that of what they were trying to say, what it was at least. So I decided I had to write a song. So I wrote the song called "The Pandemic Dance." I don't know if you've seen that or yeah. So that's probably my most important song. I think until the day I die. I think that was mostly just because of when it was written and just sort of the path that it set me on. So I kind of know going back from that, like I'm like, I have to do whatever I can to warn people about what's happening right now. And I released it before the vaccine, and it was warning about that too. But it's basically 10 years of history, right? There's a time and a place for a catchy 1-2 minute song, ragtime song, but then sometimes you need to tell a story, and it has to be a long one. And this had to be long. And it's like a 10-minute long song, right? And I wrote it at a hard time where I didn't have anything. I was getting in trouble, just in life and everything. But it was a return for the Foundring character. He's like, all right, I guess I have to go back and embrace this persona again. I posted it on YouTube, obviously. And I took when I did it, I knew I was probably going to end my channel. It took a few years, but I pinned it to my channel. So I pinned it to the front. So when you went to my channel, it was a dead channel, but you would see that as the top video. I only had like 20,000 subscribers at the time, which wasn't much, partly because it was dead. It was being leveled off, right? I should have had so many more, but they had been removing them over the years. Right? I should have had hundreds of thousands or whatever, shoulda, coulda, woulda. But then I also shared it on Reddit, and it started to get seen on the conspiracy. This was before big tech had really started, because it wasn't really until the vaccine came out that they really went nuclear on our asses. In 2020, you were still able to question a lot of the stuff without, you might get socially attacked, but you wouldn't be canceled from the internet quite yet. So I did that song, and then the election happened in the US with Biden beating Trump, and there was all the question around that election with the ballots, the mail-in ballots, because they were like, oh yeah, no one has to come in and vote because there's a disease. And I'm like, well, isn't that convenient, right? And then so all of these mail-in ballots show up in the middle of the night. Oh, looks like Biden won. And it's like, okay, fine. So I immediately wrote, after J6 happened, I got banned off of all this. After J6, January 6th, right? You know what happened there? That's when, I don't know how well known this sort of American stuff is, but that was a big deal here in the States, right? And they really went crazy, especially online, and they banned so many people after that. So all my sort of conspiracy type accounts got swept up in the ban after J6. So all the accounts I had been using on Reddit and all these other for years to talk about my conspiracy stuff that was separate from Foundring were nuked in this giant, essentially digital holocaust. And a lot of my friends got caught up with that. It was, we called it the night of the digital long knives, like where they used a J6 to go as an excuse to eliminate a lot of people that were inconvenient, shall we say. And I was one of them. And I was pissed. Because I had developed a lot of influence, and I had spent maybe 15 years of my life developing these other personas and these other accounts. And I actually had a lot of influence and a lot of say and a lot of pull. And that I'm not to say, it was that much, but it was enough that I clearly was targeted and removed in a way that was dangerous for me, in that I thought that there was a chance that I might be even going to jail. So that's where I was. Not that I had done anything illegal, but they were going after a lot of people over speech and incarcerating them, essentially. I mean, they did that. They threw the Proud Boys guy, Enrique, whatever his name is, into jail, and he wasn't even at J6. They blamed him for J6 because of some things he said. So I was like, and what's interesting is I warned people not to go to the Capitol that day. I very specifically said it was a trap. So I was one of the ones that actually saw what was coming, and I got punished for that. So that's a whole different story. So then I realized that I had to go back, just lean hard into the Foundring character because they killed all my other characters. And so then I wrote another song in 2021 called Election Fraud. Again, I was still on YouTube. And that was another 10-minute long epic. And it's one I'm very proud of as well. And it basically goes over how they stole that election. It took me 10 minutes to tell it, but I'm very proud of that one. And then the end of 2021, I wrote my first scathing song on the COVID vaccine called It Was a Mask Christmas. Now I have myocarditis. Now, this was a response. This was a parody song of Jimmy Fallon, Ariana Grande propaganda Christmas song that was released called Mask Christmas, where they were like, yeah, we're all locked up and we're having a little cute time. And oh, by the way, go get your booster. Like that was the whole song. It was like propaganda, and they've got vaccines coming out their fingers. And like, you would think it was parody, especially looking back. But no, these people were totally like the Stephen Colbert clip when he's like, vaccine, vaccine, you know, these are infamous now. But at the time, like if you made fun of that, you were called a grandma killer. I mean, it was crazy the amount of propaganda we were. So that song came out. I'm like, this song is so atrocious. I'm going to make it. Oh, and it used the classical theme, Pachelbel Canon in D, which is one of the most famous classical melodies of all time. I've played it in like 100 weddings before, but they used that brilliant classical theme, which is better than 99% of pop music today, even though I'm sick of that particular song because I played it so many times. They used that and they turned it into COVID propaganda. And I was pissed. I'm like, Pachelbel, the dude has been dead for 400 years and you're going to revive his corpse with Ariana Grande to push boosters? It's like, how dare you? So I took that and instead of, oh, it's a mass Christmas, we'll be in line for a booster. And it's like, it's a mass Christmas. Now I have myocarditis. Like it was, and it was good. It worked. And like the song was, and I remember I was like, I took that song from them. I took that song from them. And I wasn't even on Twitter or anything at the time. I mean, I had a Twitter account as Foundring, but I never posted on it because I had 2 followers. So I posted on YouTube thinking that might end my channel. I didn't put myocarditis in the title. And then fast forward, I'm almost done here. 2022, I released mRNA Speed of Science. And that was the height of the Fauci worship cult. I mean, we were in the thick of it all. And so I decided I took an old Kingston Trio. Kingston Trio was an old folk group, Americana folk group from the 50s. And yeah, they were part of that whole singing songs as protest movements, challenge the man, back when folk music was actually used to do that. So I took one of their classic old songs, old protest songs, and I rewrote it as the Speed of Science, mRNA. And I'm like singing about, let me tell you a story about a man named Fauci on a tragic and fateful day. And I'm just putting a smile on my face. And this was a really risky thing for me to do at the time, for everything. I should say I had been fired already. So the vaccine mandates went into play in America in late 2021, before our Supreme Court pushed back on it. And so late 2021, I got fired from my salary church organist job that I had for 15 years because they wanted to force me to get the vaccine. And they wanted to force my daughter to get the vaccine too, for even to enter the church, which was crazy. So and then I started losing all my other jobs because they were all vaccines. All the venues that I would play out in town, all vaccine requirements. And I did have some music friends that got fake vaccine cards to keep performing and keep working. And they told me to do it. And I said no, because I didn't want to participate. I was like, literally made me sick to my stomach, the idea of doing that and perform. Not to say that they were worse people for it because they had to do what they had to do. But in my particular situation, I'm like, I can't do that, right? So I was screwed. And I also wrote a song that may have, funnily enough, led to my YouTube channel being terminated, though I don't think it was the main reason. It's called You Will Never Be a Woman. And I wrote it a few weeks after I did the masked myocarditis song. And I was like, okay. Oh yeah, because at the time, it was so crazy. Like, it's hard. People don't realize with the Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd protests, the world just, and COVID, the world just went nuts. And then the trans aspect was a big part of it too, where the trans thing, I'm like, it wasn't even on my radar. I didn't even care. Honestly, I'm pretty libertarian when it comes to like adults can just do what they're going to do. But I remember Dave Chappelle, the comedian, right? He did a special on Netflix where he had like 2 jokes about a trans person and they wanted to take his head. They were coming after him. There was this whole thing. And I'm like, Dave Chappelle? Like, the dude, I mean, he's a legend, first of all, but like even he's not allowed to touch this. So I'm like, as I'm embracing this new Foundring persona, like, again, I'm like, all right, I guess I can write a song about that. So I wrote this song, You Will Never Be a Woman, thinking that my YouTube channel was dead, which it was. And I posted it and no one watched it. It got like 2 views. And all of a sudden, about a month later, this is December 2021, I just been fired from my job. I lashed back by doing the myocarditis song. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to give this one a try. And so I wrote, You Will Never Be a Woman. And I'd say that You Never Be a Woman happened actually November before. Anyway, it blew up on 4chan. Long story short, 4chan got wind of it. And all of a sudden, I pull up YouTube and my video on my dead channel, 5,000 views, 10,000 views, 20,000 views, 50,000 views. I'm like, oh crap, the 4chan people have got hold of this. Oh shoot. And there was a lot of people that were loving it. And then then the trans people found it. And then I started getting the threats. I started getting the death threats. And they were like, no, we're going to end your channel. It was quite bad. It was quite bad. And I'd never experienced anything like that before. To the credit, not to like malign all of them, there was a bunch of trans people and like gay people and everyone that were in the comments, and the comment section was fascinating. And it's a bummer that it's been deleted with my channel. They were supporting me. There was trans people, because the song essentially was actually very tame. And really all it said was like, yeah, you're a trans person, but you can't switch your genders. And also maybe don't sterilize children. Like, that's literally the most crazy thing I said, and ends with like, we're all created by God. And like, it's a very uplifting song. And there's people, the trans people in the comments were like, yeah, I'm a trans man. I admit that. I hate the radical people that are like demanding to go into bathrooms and stuff. Like, in other words, there were reasonable people that were seeing this. And I'm like, holy crap, this is type of content to make people meet in the middle, right? This is something that could actually bring people together. Yeah, it's a little offensive, and yeah, it kind of teases, but like, that's kind of how art is supposed to be, or at least this type of art, this social commentary, satirical humor, it used to be that way, right? So that was a huge wake-up call for me. And so this is, wow, you're getting the Foundring history. So then this is important for the timeline. When I was reading all these 4chan threads, and I was thrilled because all of a sudden, I've been writing songs at that time for, wow, almost 20 years, maybe longer. And this was the first time anyone was listening to them. Like, that's really what it felt like. It really felt like this was the first time I was actually getting people, not just watch my silly ragtime videos. It's like me and my songs that I'm writing. And I'm like, because that's a whole level of vulnerability that is far beyond just, look at this, or I'm singing the elements, right? This is me putting my soul into something, right? And that's a lot of, yeah. So 4chan was, half of them was loving it, and half of them, because it's 4chan, was like, oh, he's a Jew. Oh, it's another piano singing musician Jew. He's being artificially pushed. He's a Jew. And I loved it. I thought that was hilarious, because like, you really make it when you get accused of being a Jew by 4chan. Like, that's when you know you've really made it in this world. So I was like, all right, I love this. Okay. And so I'm like, I have to write 4chan a song. I have to write 4chan a song about the Jews. So I sat down, and probably my best single moment of artistic inspiration of all time. And I wrote a song called Oy Vey, Shut It Down in like 20 minutes. On a few days before Christmas in 2021. And it's partly to show 4chan that I probably am not Jewish, but also to make fun of them, right? Could be like, because I basically did what I did in the Foil song, which is where I'm like, here's all these silly conspiracies, Keanu's a vampire king and all that stuff. And with this song, I'm like, the Jews are that did this, and the Jews are under this rock, and there's a Jew over here, and there's Jews over here. So it was meant as a tongue-in-cheek thing, but also sings about certain things that they might ring a little true about certain influence that certain people might have, right? So there was a little bit of that, but I'm like also like, yeah, Jews, they fake outer space, and they've got lasers in outer space, so it's obviously a joke, right? It's clearly but I think that one is what probably did more damage to my career than anything before or ever since. Not the COVID song, not the "You Will Never Be a Woman." It was that song that ended my career. I know that because I have had opportunities come up when that song specifically was cited as to why I have not been hired. And these are very big opportunities, So this was a career-ending song for me, at least in the mainstream.
Is it available on YouTube now?
No, YouTube will nuke it immediated if anyone tries to re-upload
on
it.
X? Is it on X?
Yes. Yeah, I have several. X banned the first version. So let me catch up to the X thing. So that through 2022, I started having those "You Will Never Be a Woman" and "Oy Vey Shut It Down" started to go more and more viral. And then I made "Speed of Science" at the end of 2022, October 2022. And that was probably the final straw, because that then actually went viral and hit 100,000 views. And YouTube deleted my original "Oy Vey Shut It Down" for hate speech and gave me 1 strike on my channel. So they determined that "Oy Vey Shut It Down" was hate speech. Interestingly, they also deleted the pandemic dance for medical misinformation. And I appealed that. Both of those decisions, they ended up restoring pandemic dance, which is
Oh, they did. Okay.
But for a year before they deleted my entire channel, they ended up just because I was like, this is satire. They refused to restore "Oy Vey Shut It Down." So I was dumb, and I continued to record I made new versions of "Oy Vey Shut It Down," but then I changed the title around. I did like an anagram of the title. I didn't upload that old video anymore, but I uploaded several versions of that same song, being like, screw you. Partly because I knew that it wasn't hate speech, right?
Yeah.
I knew that I was writing it from a satirical perspective, and it isn't hate speech. Like, there's nothing hateful in it, right? It's a little on the nose, no pun intended. So I'm sure YouTube probably wasn't happy about that. But at the time, I still had only 1 strike on my channel. And by the end of 2022, January 2023, the first week is when I got banned on YouTube. I had those 3 videos were going out of control. In other words, YouTube couldn't stop them. Just like they stopped Foil from 10 years earlier. These 3 were blowing past 100,000, which might not sound a lot, but for controversial content like that on YouTube in the most censorial time in American history on YouTube, that was no. That's a no. So let's just say it wasn't a shock when I was banned, but it still was, because it was like, it was my life. It was my life work. I know that sounds silly for YouTube, but I was a college dropout who, instead of pursuing the normal course, decided to, hey, here's this new social media thing, not just with YouTube, but just you can make it yourself now. That's what the internet was presented to us when it obviously kind of wasn't. I mean, there was a window when you could break through, and in a way, I was lucky, and I did catch that window, and I did make that happen for me. But then, of course, they all took it away, right? So it was, they deleted almost 1,000 videos. 99% were just me playing ragtime and jazz and doing piano lessons and video game music and stuff for kids and teaching instructional stuff. Like, they threw out the baby with the bathwater. And again, that's on me for pushing the boundaries. But I'm like, guys, couldn't you have just deleted the videos that were bad. And it's also, it's not just the videos, it's the networking. It's all the Reddit links and everything every time my videos went viral, all the links from other places, they all go to dead links now. It's like I didn't exist and I could no longer communicate with my audience anymore. I was cut off from them. And to this day, I still get messages almost 3 years later saying, wait, you were kicked off of YouTube. I haven't seen from you for so long. I wonder what happened. So that's how pernicious this is. It's not like they sent out a message to say, oh, this person's banned. You have this audience of tens of thousands of people, but then it's like you're gone, like a fart in the night, a fart in the wind, right? Not to go back to the flatulence thing. But so anyway, I had been banned off of Bandcamp too. And I had only, Bandcamp is a website to sell music, a popular one. And I had only put up You Will Never Be a Woman, Speed of Science, and Oy Vey Shut It Down on Bandcamp. And they still banned it was those 3 songs that were the bad songs, the big 3. So I do think it was a combination of those 3 that did in my channel. I think more pressing, it was probably the Speed of Science one going viral because it called out the vaccine in 2022 when you weren't supposed to do that. And I think then they put my channel under scrutiny, and then they saw the Oy Vey Shut It Down that I kept uploading, and they're like, you know what? And I had a bunch of trans people still that were mad. They're saying that we are reporting your channel every day until it gets banned. So they were on a
God.
to get my channel banned. So initially I thought it was the You Will Never Be a Woman song that got my channel banned. I now think that was just a factor, and it was a combination of those 3 songs. So I went to Twitter. It was still Twitter at the time. Elon had just bought it. And I'm like, I guess I will try again here and pick up the pieces. I had 10, 20 followers on Twitter. I wrote a song, Hey Susan Wojcicki. Susan Wojcicki was the CEO of YouTube at the time. And I wrote it kind of just being like, how dare you? I was nice about it, but I wrote a pretty scathing song about her. And then I also been like, in the song I wrote about, like, here, I guess I'm on Twitter now. So I'm like, this is what I'm going to be here. And so I started posting on Twitter, and I used a little bit of the momentum from my YouTube channel ban to be like, hey, people, follow me here. But it wasn't really successful, and my account was still quite small. And I started writing more songs. And June 2023, less than 6 months after I was banned on YouTube, Twitter banned me. Twitter suspended my account. No explanation. And this is Elon's Twitter, right? This is supposed to be the free speech Twitter. I hadn't done any violations. I was just posting my songs. I wasn't doing whatever. They never gave me a reason. They ignored all of my appeals. And I was like, all right, I guess Foundring's actually dead. That was the time when I really felt like it's over, really, really, because I no longer had a YouTube, I no longer had Twitter, and I had no other social media. Foundring essentially was wiped from the internet. It's like he didn't exist anymore. You could search my name and it would take you nowhere. Isn't that crazy how they can unperson someone, especially after like 20 years of content and work? And it was devastating. It really was. It was because it's like my last link to the world had been taken from me. I did make a Ragtime Rev Twitter account, like alt, but I wasn't able to get the word out. I didn't have enough of a following 2 years ago, even to have anyone to. There were a few legends that definitely noticed, and I don't want to. They were like, Foundring was been banned on Twitter. Oh my God, he just got banned on YouTube. What's going on? But I didn't have a big enough account. And then, so it played into my advantage. So I was able to get new work, new jobs, even through the vaccine stuff. They had rolled back some of the vaccine mandates. The mask mandates were still an issue. And I still end up getting fired for not wearing masks in 2023, in late 2023, when I asked if my choir students in high school that I was teaching could sing without a mask, and they fired me as an answer to the question. In August of 2023, this is almost, because COVID started in 2019. This is almost 4 years into COVID. I was fired for asking if kids could sing without a mask on. That's how bad it was in California, right? So during my Twitter ban, I was like, I guess I could actually probably have a better chance to get some work again. So I started working. I got a great job as a musical director for a local theater company, for a musical theater company. Really nice position. And I did some shows with them. And it was great because I was like, well, actually, I can't get canceled anymore because my content's all gone on the internet. It was almost like it was liberating, as weird as that is. I can just get on with my life. And as fate would have it, on October 7th, the one where of the Israel thing, October 7th, 2023, Twitter restores my account. The one that they had banned almost half a year earlier with no explanation. They wouldn't even respond to my appeals. All of a sudden, I got a message from a friend of mine, said, bro, your account is back on Twitter. I'm like, what? It's X now. It's X now. It's turned to X in my absence. And I'm like, what? And I log on, and sure enough, there's my X account. It has my videos. They're back. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's cool. But of course, this is right during October 7th. So everyone's freaking out about October 7th. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm back, but no one really noticed. And I'm like, all right, whatever. So I kept making songs, but little did I know my Twitter account was then sent to my employer. Almost immediately, I was doxxed to my employer. And I have, to this day, have no idea how that happened or who did it or how they found out who I was and that I was the one, because I didn't, my name, like me working with that theater company was separate. Like there was, anyway, someone had to do some research to make that happen. And it's just crazy because I was totally fine. It was because it was in the aftermath of October 7th that was the issue, because everyone was now like, any type of anti-Semitism is the worst thing in the world, right? So there was this fever right there. And so someone had sent to my employer, Oy vey, shut it down, the song. And they said, you're employing an anti-Semite. And they fired me. And like in the middle of a musical production. Actually, I was doing 2 musical productions right there. And that wasn't the only time that song has hurt me. I've heard I was gonna get a gig with the local symphony, doing a performance, and I found out that they cited that song as why I couldn't work with them. So that was a bad one, unfortunately for me, even though it's kind of a legendary one. And then so I recorded that song that I had recorded, the Oy vey, shut it down, got censored on Twitter. X censored it for hate speech. I'm like, are you kidding? And they censored another one of my songs for hate speech at the time that I made too. And I'm like, this is crazy. It's supposed to be the free speech thing. But they didn't ban me. But it was devastating to lose the jobs. And I'm like, because I was trying to do right. I was trying to do, like, all right, I will play the game again. I will go back and do that world. And they refused to let that happen for me. So I kind of now have had to lean into this kind of content because I just keep getting fired from every job that I have over it, which is just unfortunate because your work should stand for themselves. Like I work with kids. I work as a soccer coach too sometimes. It's one of my strengths is teaching music. I'm clearly passionate about the music that I do, and it's infectious, right? And so all the kids that were my students, they love me, right? They really miss me as a teacher. At least I've heard from some of them, or some of their parents at least. They're like, it's such a bummer, And again, your work should speak for yourself, not this persona online. I get, people, there's certain things that are bad for PR and whatnot, and I have sung and said some offensive things. I'll admit that, but that's sort of, it's separate from what you do as a job. So, very long story short, I have been working through X still. I've had about 10 songs censored on X. I wrote one, well, I guess late last year. Well, my Christmas song I wrote last year got censored, but I wrote one about India last year that got me suspended again, and they deleted that one, which was a bummer because it actually went uber viral. It got 2 million plays on X, not just views, which is what they show on the front. Those aren't real plays. Actual video plays are usually way smaller than views. Twitter changed the metrics. They used to show video plays on videos 2 years ago. They hid that hidden away that only the creator can see, and they changed it with just video impressions, which is literally if a bot views the tweet, it adds it as a view. It's not an actual play it's just someone scrolling by. They don't have to press play on the video. They did that deceptively. In fact, I noticed before my first Twitter ban, before it was X, they used to show the view counts on videos. And just like I noticed with Foil 10 years ago, when YouTube froze the view count, I noticed Twitter starting to freeze the view count on some of my videos. The impressions would go up, but my actual view count plastered right there, it would stay the same. And I started to sound the alarm and say, guys, they're doing something to the metrics of my videos. And the week that I started really sounding the alarm to my small Twitter account, Twitter changed it and they hid that. So you could no longer monitor video views in real time. Now, I'm not saying that they saw my posts, but I think they were, as a PR thing, as Elon was changing things to X, they needed to be, for a business perspective, it makes it look better. That big old number on those videos. Oh, I have 1 million views. Well, no, you don't have 1 million views. So even the song, the Honeypot song that I just did, it shows 1.3 or 4 million views on the video. But if you actually go and click on the video in the metrics that only I can see, it's only about 200,000 plays. 200,000.
Oh.
These are not actual plays. Hardly anyone realizes that, which just goes to show you how fake and gay the internet really is, because everyone doesn't care. No one cares. They just like to see a number and they like to say the number. Like, I'll tell them, no, your video does not actually have 1 million views. Like, I won't say that my video has 1 million views. My video actually only has about 200,000 views, and it's got about 1 million impressions, which is different. The song I wrote for India actually had 2 million plays in 24 hours and about 5 or 6, maybe 7 million impressions. It was exploding. And then they froze it, suspended my account, and deleted the video for hate speech. And so my most viral video since since Inspector Gadget from 2013, that was my most viral moment. And X killed it. X killed it. And to make matters worse, not because at least, I'm still on X, but I was doxxed with my number and address and everything. And that happened. The trans people did that too. They doxed my address. They were sending death threats. The Indians were, because of the song from India. And they, when I was suspended and I was reporting them and X was approving them with my personal information, they're like, this doesn't violate blah, 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 blah. So they suspended me for the song, deleted my viral video, and then allowed death threats and doxing and approved them against me. It's an intimidation thing. And again, I'm not trying to say, oh, I'm this important, powerful voice. This happens to a lot of people that are small, have small followings too. Like, this is a multifaceted, and it's not people in a room either. It's just the algo. This is AI. I don't know what it is, but it's not acting in humanity's best interest. Let's put it that way. So I have been still walking on eggshells on X. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm banned still. And that's just where we are. And I'm not trying to say, oh, woe is me, but because I chose the path. I chose to challenge the status quo, and that comes with consequences and repercussions. And even the theater company that fired me, to this day, I still don't fault them necessarily, because just of the environment that we are in. And I get that, donors would stop giving money and they don't want to be associated with certain stuff. So, wow, there you got the full Foundring thing, from the YouTube to the transition to Twitter, or X or whatever. And here we are. So I am talking to you right now. I feel like that's like everything.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it was very interesting, and I'm very frustrated and I'm very annoyed that this happened to you, because it should not happen. And it makes me really angry every single time when I hear stories like that, when people censor for no reason at all for telling the truth. It's extremely annoying.
Well, censored for comedy, because not everything I do is true, right? But sometimes it's just meant to be silly or funny or get people to think, right? Like, get people to think about the world around them. And that's, I guess, you're not allowed to do that, right? Even Dave Chappelle is not allowed to make a joke about trans stuff. And I do feel like we're turning a corner. I feel like it's going to be a lot of bumpy roads up ahead. But a lot of people, like, the fact that we're even having this conversation, like, here you are, like, halfway around the world, and I'm telling you my like sob life story, like, woo, it's me, and you're being so generous and gracious with your time. I know you probably had have questions and stuff, but I'm just yapping, but I don't get a chance too often to talk about a lot of this. So I appreciate that you are receptive to listening.
No. I really, I think this is very important. Like, this is, everybody needs to hear this, because we have to fight for people like you, because I feel like not everybody has courage, and not everybody is ready to risk like you did. Not everybody ready to give up, the opportunity.
There's a fine line between courage and stupidity, though, right? Isn't there? I feel like
Still, there was still courageous. That's bravery. Because if you hadn't had that, you would not, we would be just like doing nothing, right? So I feel like we need to stand up and fight for people like that, because we not everybody has courage, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing at all. Like, if you're not courageous, it's
I think the
okay.
artists, it doesn't, you don't have to even be an artist to do it, because even you can make a meme and that could go halfway around the world, right? That's a lot. Anyone can make a meme, like, right? And so, but it is up to the artists to sort of, that line, that narrow line in between courageous and, oh, it's like too far. And that it's a fun tightrope walk. It's a fun balancing act. That's for sure. And sometimes we are the ones that cross it, and we have to sort of take the repercussions. But you're right. And sometimes I doubt myself. I second guess. I say, what's the point? Yada, yada, yada. But every once in a while, I'll be like, I'll talk to someone, and they say, hey, in 2020, I was terrified and hiding under my thing and ready to get vaccinated and all that. And then I saw your pandemic dance song, and it actually made me kind of think about things in a different way. And I wasn't as afraid and all this stuff. So I hear stories like that. And I'm like, well, I guess if I could do that for a few people, then it might be worth it, because then those people can affect other people. And those people, you know what I'm saying? Like, it starts with that seed
Yes.
that has to be planted. And sometimes that's like, it's important to say the things that shouldn't be said. There's a line that from my song, Oy Vey, Shut It Down. There's certain things that can't be said, so sing them all instead, right? So I can sing them, and of course I've still been punished for that. But when you do that, it gives you this buffer, and yeah, I guess you could say I'm hiding behind the art, but like at the same time, it's the tool that I use, right? Though for years I was just on forums and trying to use logic and arguments and writing papers and doing conspiracy theories, and that works for some people. But then at the end of the day, sometimes you just need a 2-minute catchy jingle to distill that 10 years of research into that 2 minutes, and then you can have equally, if not more, damage to the system if you do it that way. So now, I feel like that is, my efforts are better spent less on anonymous internet conspiracy posting and singing, because I have this musical skill. I'm like, well, why not marry these worlds? Why not? You can put a little of your Scrabble word influence in there and help you with your lyrics and stuff, and your diction and all that. So yeah, that's it. That's the Foundring origin story in a nutshell, or a large nutshell.
Awesome. Well, thank you. But we're gonna have to do part 2, because I have so
Sure.
many questions. We didn't get into conspiracy theories, so
Yes.
we really have to do that
Yeah.
to finally get my YouTube channel deleted and yours.
Yeah, that's right.
So we need to get into that, because
Be
otherwise,
careful. Be
yeah.
careful what I say.
No,
Well,
no,
yeah.
no. But like, I don't want to be careful. I'm so done. Like, I just am so frustrated, and I'm so done with being afraid. And I mean, yeah, as you said, like, we have to be smart about it, but still, like, we should not be afraid to speak for the love of God. Like, we're not doing anything. We're just
It's okay to be
speaking.
wrong about something too. Even a conspiracy, like this notion that to entertain an idea means you have to believe it and then be beholden to that for the rest of your life is silly. I've admitted I was wrong about a lot of stuff in the past, and I feel like maybe it's the artist in me who is good to I changed but some people have a hard time being like, well, I guess I was wrong about this. I think that's what we're dealing with. And I think humor and art can go a long way, not for everyone, but can go a long way to sort of, I'm not talking about just on the left, I'm talking about on the right too, and even I've had to convince a lot of them that art and musical theater and this type of stuff isn't just like gay and liberal. You know what I mean? Like there's something about it that is, again, goes back. We were singing before we were talking 20,000 years ago. Really. That's really what, and we were using comedy, and we were making fun of our neighbors, the people that look different from us. That was the way that we dealt with that, instead of killing each other, was through humor. Does that make sense? So like when I'm talking about this ragtime era and these whites and blacks writing songs mocking each other, the alternative to that is killing each other. You see where I'm getting at? When you're not allowed to make fun of each other, then the tensions actually start to build. And then you start to turn to violence when your words are taken away. So you see what I'm saying? Like being able to use comedy and humor, and yes, racial stuff and all this stuff, it's important. It's fundamental to who we are as a human species, with lots of very different types of cultures and backgrounds and people. And instead of just pretending that we all just get along and agree with everything, which is dumb and objectively not true, and it never has been true and never will be true, we can acknowledge our differences and celebrate them and mock them when needed. And that is okay. And certainly you can be distasteful and you can go too far, and that's what it is. But to be able to say, no, you can't ever talk about this. No, you can't make fun of trans or Jews or Indians, or like with me, I grew up in the South Park era. Everyone can make fun of everybody else. If you tell me I can't make fun of someone, I'm going to make fun of them because you told me not to. That's that's the American way. I know there's other cultures could do that, but that's America. That's what our heritage is. We are challenging the status quo, and we have this freedom of speech, or we should, which is why it's so stupid that, this recent story of the girlfriend of the FBI director suing these people for making fun of her. And I'm like, oh, you're going to sue them? I'm going to write you a song. And look at that song went kind of viral. Like, it's by 2 times the most liked video I've ever posted on Twitter. I just uploaded this week. The second one is probably Oive Shut It Down. That is probably the only one that's even come close. But this one, it doubled it. And I'm like, how did that even happen? I just wrote it in a day, and like, sure, I'm getting a little bit better in my production and stuff, but I think it's just people are ready. They're ready for that. They're ready to, like you. They're tired of not speaking out. And if they get banned, that threat isn't as bad as it used to be, right? Like, it's cred, if anything. Like, now I can say, yeah, I've been banned from YouTube. What, you haven't been banned from YouTube? Yeah, you're not trying hard enough, right? It's something that it's now, it's like, yeah, okay, that's you're doing something right. And as weird as that is, that's where we are. So I would love to do a part 2 where we can talk about conspiracies, in particular, the Reddit part of the story. I know it's a tall ask of you, but I did make a documentary about Reddit.
I've seen it.
Oh,
it's in your pinned on your
profile. Was, yes, it was recently. I had it pinned. It's a 3-hour thing, and it goes through that history of conspiracies. And it's kind of about Reddit, but it's more about the internet as a whole, and kind of because it goes through like Alex Jones getting banned from YouTube and all these things that happened, mileposts along the way, where it brought us to where we are. The early days of the internet, where you could just talk about anything, to the COVID era, essentially, and how I was sort of, I lived through it, and from my own sort of unique perspective. So I would love to talk about that and some of the conspiracy theories that are in that, and Sandy Hook and Boston Bomb, because I'm big on the Sandy Hook thing. That's another one that it's like, oh
my God. Yeah.
That's a spicy one.
Okay.
That'll get
We're
your YouTube
definitely getting deleted. Okay.
Yeah.
We're definitely getting canceled. Okay.
Yeah. Sandy Hook totally happened. Don't sue us for $1 billion, $1 trillion. Thank you.